A massive black hole ripped apart a star near our solar system, and that explosion was so bright it could be seen from Earth. This may sound like the plot of an action movie, but it's not science fiction. It happened recently in 2020. The star was located just 1,600 light years away from us, which is very close by astronomical standards. And the explosion was one of the brightest events in the universe recorded at the time. But it wasn't visible to the naked eye. The explosion itself was only visible with X-ray telescopes. To see the light emitted from this explosion on Earth, we would need to be inside a bubble with a radius of over 10 billion light years. And even then we wouldn't see much. While it's fun to imagine ourselves inside such a giant bubble floating through space, there's no need for that. Here are 8 weird things that would happen if gravity suddenly worked sideways. We don't have to leave Earth or float in space to experience them. Earth Day celebration. It may seem obvious that gravity will continue to pull us towards the center of the Earth no matter where we go. After all, that's how it's always been. But that might not necessarily be true. Gravity isn't just about being pulled towards the center of the Earth. There's also centrifugal force, which is a force that makes water spin around in your toilet bowl when you flush. In fact, centrifugal force is what keeps Earth from flying away into outer space. This happens because Earth spins on its axis. If it didn't, the centrifugal force would pull the planet apart. If gravity suddenly started working sideways, we would all be affected by centrifugal force, since the ground beneath our feet would shift to the side. When this happens, people would start floating towards the edge of the planet. For a moment, Earth would look like one of those amusement park rides where you can spin around and upside down and everything looks like it is going slow motion. But while that sounds fun, it would be dangerous. Eventually, people would fall off the planet and float away into space. The same thing would happen to cars, buildings, and trees. They would all start floating away from the planet. We might call it a lucky day when we witness something like this, but it'd be anything but lucky. In fact, it would be terrifying. Giant ocean. A day in the life of a sailor on the open ocean is usually filled with lots of rocking and rolling. However, they probably never thought their ship would roll sideways. If gravity suddenly worked sideways, all bodies of water would start flowing towards the equator. Oceans would turn into gigantic rivers, flowing from west to east. Sailing across the Pacific Ocean would be easier than sailing down a small stream. You could just sit back, relax, and let the current carry you along. Although you would need a boat made out of something other than iron, wood, or plastic to survive the journey. That is because all metals and non-organic materials would be repelled by the magnetic fields generated by Earth's sideways gravity and float away into space. So you'd probably need a boat made out of rubber duckies. Magnetic fields. Rubber duckies aren't the only things that would start floating away. Any metal object that isn't attached to its owner would suddenly become weightless and fly away. This means your keys would leave your pocket, your jewelry would leave your body, and your car would leave the road. But it doesn't stop there. All the electrical wires and pipelines that run through cities would also come loose and start flying away. Planes would lose control and start spiraling upwards until they disappeared into the clouds. Magnetic fields would become distorted and unpredictable, without gravity holding them down. Compasses would spin wildly and modern technology would grind to a halt. Sideways gravity would literally throw the world into chaos. New aurora. Sunsets and sunrises are beautiful natural phenomena that occur because of gravity. The atmosphere of our planet is divided into several layers. The lowest layer is called the troposphere, and it extends about 7 kilometers above Earth's surface. This is where most weather occurs, and it's also where clouds form. The next layer up is the stratosphere, and it's here that the ozone layer is located. The ozone layer absorbs most of the harmful radiation from the sun. Without the ozone layer, life on Earth would be impossible. If gravity suddenly worked sideways, the atmosphere would collapse and Earth would lose its protective ozone layer. As a result, harmful UV rays from the sun would start burning the Earth. The surface of our planet would become too hot to support life. Any water on Earth would evaporate and the Earth would become a desert. The only life that could survive on the new scorched Earth would be microorganisms that can live in extreme environments. But there's one beautiful thing that would appear in our sky. Aurora. Aurora appear when charged particles from the sun interact with gases in Earth's atmosphere. The particles from the sun are carried by solar winds, and when they reach Earth, they get trapped in the atmosphere. This causes the gases to glow, and that is what we see as the northern lights or southern lights. The shapeshifter. If gravity started working sideways, the Earth would change shape. Gravity is what holds the Earth together. Without gravity, the Earth would simply fall apart. If gravity started working sideways, the Earth would flatten at the poles and bulge at the equator. That's because the centrifugal force would be stronger at the equator than at the poles. But this wouldn't just happen to the Earth. Everything else would also change shape, including the moon and the stars. Stars would wobble and change position in the sky. Planets would change shape and the moon would drift away from Earth and crash into the planet next door. Of course, that planet would be the moon. Fortunately, this won't happen anytime soon. If gravity were to suddenly work sideways, the Earth would explode. Floating houses. If gravity worked sideways, it would take only a few minutes for houses to start floating away. Walls would buckle and roofs would collapse as rooms floated towards the equator. Windows would shatter as the air pressure inside the house suddenly became lower than outside. Doors would burst open and swing toward the equator. Refrigerators would slide off their hinges and float away from the planet. Pets would float away and family members would drift apart. People would cling to each other for dear life as they slowly floated away from their homes. Some people would choose to stay in their homes, but they wouldn't be able to stay there for long. Eventually, the buildings would start to collapse and people would have to flee into the streets. They would be met with scenes of total devastation. Rivers of lava. Rivers of lava are already pretty scary, but they become even scarier if they start flowing sideways. If gravity started working sideways, volcanoes would erupt and lava would flow toward the equator. The lava would flow so fast that it would make the rivers of molten rock appear to move at super speed. People living near volcanoes would be forced to flee their homes and run for their lives. But they wouldn't be running away from lava. Instead, they would be running toward lava. If they didn't, they would be swept up in the molten river and burned alive. Those who made it to higher ground would be met with a terrifying sight. Volcanoes would form giant lava lakes at the equator, stretching as far as the eye can see. These lava lakes would eventually cover the entire planet and Earth would become a giant ball of burning lava. Now check out crazy things that would happen if Earth stopped rotating or watch. What would you do if you found a portal to another dimension?